Good evening on the behalf of Lisanas Foundation, and I welcome all of you. First of all, I would like to congratulate Frank Leberger for writing such a detailed issue brief on a critical subject that deserves and demands world's attention. And I would also like to welcome our eminent panelists, Professor Naidu, Professor Kipken, and Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar. And I also see some of eminent guests and our seniors, who have guided me personally in my journey, in my career, and also like they have shaped India's foreign policy over the last 3 or 4 decades. So I would like to welcome again Mr. C.D. Sahai, Vijay Nambiar sir, Ambassador Neelam Dev. And so we're just going to begin. Before that, just a few observations that I can make. So it seems that the world is back again into the era of concentration camps and alliances. We see that we are again back with concentration camps in Xinjiang, Tibet, and world is back with those realist interpretation of classic international relations doctrines in which we are facing military alliances. It's kind of an anti-evolutionary drive in which we are moving. And in that series falls another debacle or another crisis which has unfolded itself in Myanmar. Myanmar, over the last 50, 60 years, has always witnessed the dominance of military in its governance. In 1988, we saw a worst kind of suppression in Myanmar. Then in 2007, in 2015, finally the democracy was brought in a very partial manner to Myanmar, and we hoped that it would survive. But I guess 2021 has dashed our hopes, not only with Corona, but I guess with the democracy also. And we see that across the world, the values which are spreading, they are of authoritarianism and repression. So, I mean, amidst such a crisis, we are back here again to discuss the issue and the role played by authoritarian neighbors in power in fomenting such crises in Myanmar. And without wasting much of your time, I will request Frank to start his presentation now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before that, I'll just a moment. I would like to check with Dr. Kipgen. Dr. Kipgen, are you there? Can you hear us?
Okay, now with my earphone, I think I'm able to hear. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can hear you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you.
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Frank, you can start. Yes. Yeah.
Good. Dear panelists and guests and co-hosts, hosts, viewers who are joining us here online and live, thank you for coming all here to hear and discuss my paper on Myanmar. The title is Xi Jinping Covert Myanmar Strategy the Cause for China's Involvement in the Coup d'etat? Good. Today is April 1st, and exactly 2 months ago, the military coup d'etat in Myanmar happened. And one question remains. The question is unanswered. To what extent and how is China involved in the coup d'etat? This coup d'etat was organized by the coup leader, General Min Aung Hlaing, the military leader of Myanmar. And what are the guiding principles behind Chinese involvement? I try to do this using only open, available information from China and outside of China, but mostly in Chinese. Right at the beginning of the coup, when there was not much open repression from the military in Myanmar, which is known as the Tatmadaw, civil disobedience movement, CDM, was formed spontaneously by the people of Myanmar all over the country. The decentralized CDM encouraged people from all walks of life and the members of Myanmar's ethnic groups to use all available peaceful means, such as strikes, traffic disruptions, protest marches, and sit-ins to disrupt the functioning of the country. This was very successful at the beginning, and there were not many casualties, but now it's becoming very brutal, and many casualties from the civilian side. The Chinese government publicly denied all involvement and knowledge of the coup. And the Chinese government cites its traditional non-interference policies. But what happened in Myanmar has become ever more doubtful in the course of events. This doubt was nurtured by the following occurrences, which were preceding or coinciding with the coup. The first occurrence, out of the ordinary diplomatic moves. Yes, thank you. Just 3 weeks before the coup, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi did pay a high-level visit to Myanmar. It was January 12. And he had a one-on-one talk with General Hlaing. But Wang Yi is a diplomat and technically not General Hlaing's counterpart. Nonetheless, the odd meeting between Wang and Hlaing inadvertently revealed a particular kind of wording in their communiques, which could easily be interpreted as either tacit Chinese support for the coup or even active encouragement. Second occurrence. There was a strange military movement from Chinese military units going to the Sino-Myanmar border, just right before the coup or around the same time. And there were elections in Myanmar in November, early November. And after these elections, there were already rumors that a military takeover could perhaps take place. So there were rumors. And on January 27 this year, General Hlaing made an ominous statement talking to other generals in the Tatmadaw, saying that the Myanmar constitution would be revoked if the laws were not followed properly by the then government, which is now toppled. I speculate that this was perhaps a signal to Beijing that the coup was imminent. So maybe Xi Jinping has understood this, and he ordered his military, the Chinese military, which is called PLA, People's Liberation Army, was mobilized shortly before the coup. And how do I know this? This news is supported by reports from the Taiwanese TV network Eastern Broadcast Company, EBC. Their sources are not clear. The sources of EBC might be Taiwanese intelligence circles. EBC reported right on February 2 that the PLA was already moving some 12,000 combat troops to the Sino-Myanmar border shortly before or coinciding with the coup on February 1, seemingly as if the Chinese knew beforehand what would happen that day. But prominent among those troops is a specialized brigade moving to positions near rural Linzang County, which is on the Chinese side of the Myanmar border. And Linzang is in southwestern Yunnan province. The Crack Brigade includes infantry, artillery, mountain and chemical warfare, air assault, and anti-aircraft supporting aviation. PLA Air Force was temporarily stationing at Linzang Commercial Airport. Several units of fighter aircraft, J-10, plus electronic warfare surveillance aircraft were reported by Taiwanese news, mainstream news. Okay, now if this unit deployed was supposed to be for humanitarian reasons, as was later flouted by Chinese news, then specialized troops trained for attack are hardly a suitable tool for purely defensive or humanitarian missions. So attack troops are not good at humanitarian missions. So there are many theories. Why did they move the troops so fast to the border? I have my own theory, which says the PLA move was a warning to the US and to India to stay away from Myanmar, hoping to deter the Quad from supporting the CDM and help reinstate the legitimate government, which was toppled on February 1st. Now, the third occurrence is close military cooperation before the coup. This is no secret. This was going on, but nobody knows really how the scope of this. The PLA and the Tatmadaw are known to mutually train their officers. According to scholars from Australia, many officers in the Tatmadaw have trained at PLA academies or served secretly and temporarily inside PLA units and vice versa. The mutual exchanges have a long tradition. Furthermore, Beijing is bankrolling about 80% of Myanmar's military expenditures, mainly providing arms, tanks, and fighter aircraft. The fourth occurrence, suspicious flights from Myanmar to China and vice versa, right after the coup. This again was overseas Chinese media reported that Chinese aviation authorities had already announced in late January 2021 that during the upcoming Chinese New Year holiday, all flights to China by Chinese and Myanmar carriers would be cancelled, at least until February 20. And you have to know there are many Chinese expats and Chinese immigrants and overseas Chinese living in Myanmar who want to go to China to join their relatives there. Now, the Chinese government said the reason for these flight cancellations are to control the spread of COVID-19 pandemic from Myanmar to China. Yet in spite of such official Chinese claims, several suspicious commercial flights, all during the night, connecting Myanmar and China, were already in the air around February 14. And they could be followed live on air traffic websites. That's what I did. I saw it with my own eyes. Those flights did arouse suspicions all over the place, also in Myanmar, due to the deliberate and clumsy attempt of Myanmar carriers to disguise both the nature and the destination of these flights. Many people from the CDM movement in Myanmar speculated that Chinese soldiers or security equipment or military hardware were being covertly funneled into Myanmar. All of these allegations and speculation have so far not been able to be verified independently. So I cannot say anything about that. To counter the ongoing speculation, in mid-February, Beijing officially stated that those flights did only transport fresh seafood and seafood from China to Myanmar, seafood from Kunming to Yangon. This explanation is highly implausible because the Chinese city of Kunming is so far inland that it cannot be considered as a credible source for good fresh seafood. Good. Now we go to the next. Now we go to the main point. Why would China want to get involved in Myanmar? It seems counterproductive. Now the answer is This is, no, the other, please. Before. No, okay. Yeah, good. Yeah, the blue one. Good, this one. All right. Just a second. Yeah, okay. The answer is Xi Jinping's new Myanmar strategy. So before we get to the covert strategy, I first have to a little bit explain the grand global strategy of Xi Jinping, which is responsible for this covert strategy. And the overt strategy is, of course, is China becoming technological superpower by 2035 and the sole global superpower in 2049. Xi's aim is simply to establish a new world order, one that is based on anti-democratic authoritarianism and Marxist-Leninist ideology. Xi is also gradually reintroducing to China all those Maoist ideological, economic, and political precepts shelved by Deng Xiaoping, a previous leader, in 1978. Now, China under Xi Jinping is gradually regressing into an aggressive, inglorious, and deadly Maoist past. With the geopolitical rivalry between US and China heating up after Donald Trump, the geopolitical and geostrategic value of Myanmar began to rise dramatically in the eyes of Beijing. In 2013, right at the beginning of his tenure, Xi Jinping had forged his global strategy, the so-called Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. This is by design a Chinese debt trap combined with predatory contractual clauses for the debtor countries. And the debtor countries are slowly strangled, and Myanmar also, yeah, in order to bring the country gradually into the Chinese economic and political orbit. Good. Myanmar became an integral part of this new Chinese strategy, and the country gained value as China's second crucial access point to the Indian Ocean via the 1,700-kilometer long China-Myanmar Economic Corridor, or CMEC. Could you please, now the map? The map? Yeah, thank you. Here you can, this red line, which is forked at the end, this is basically CMEC. It begins in Kunming in China, and it ends in Yachiang province in the port city of Kyaukphyu, and there's a fork, the other is Sittwe, the port of Sittwe. So CMEC is a physical corridor connecting China's landlocked southwest Yunnan province, capital is Kunming, via Mandalay in north-central Myanmar to the port city of Kyaukphyu, which is here at the lower end of the fork. And then there's another from Mandalay to Yangon. Okay, it's not on a map. They're doing pipelines for gas and oil, road and rail travel, rail lines. This newly built commercial port and economic zones on the Myanmar-China border and on these ports are the easiest way, the port at the Bay of Bengal, are the easiest way for the Chinese to bypass the geopolitical choke point of the Malacca Strait and solve once and for all the strategic conundrum it poses for Chinese strategic planners. So this is, the CMEC is geopolitically very important because Malacca Strait can be circumvented. Now let's go to the covert part of the Xi strategy. And as on the map, you can see the closest, geographically closest point of China to Myanmar. This protruding place here in protruding into Myanmar is called Yunnan province, and the capital of Yunnan is Kunming. And it's a multi-ethnic province in China. There are only 67% ethnic Chinese Han, and 30-something are Chinese minorities, and the same minorities as in Myanmar. So the leaders, the communist leaders of Yunnan province, they are Han Chinese, but also ethnic minorities. And they cultivate close personal ties with nationals of Myanmar across the border because they speak the same language. And also in the 1960s, 70s, there was the Communist Party of Burma or Communist Party of Myanmar, and the leaders were mostly Chinese-speaking people. And after the disbanding of the Communist Party of Myanmar in 1989, many settled in Kunming, in Yunnan province. So the people and the leaders in Yunnan province are very, very close culturally and linguistically to people in northern Myanmar. Good. So recently a number of internal but unclassified Chinese documents that were temporarily available on lower level provincial government sites in Yunnan around 2019 are shedding some light on Xi's covert Myanmar strategy that he seems to have formulated during a closed-door Myanmar policy session in Beijing. So far, I have not seen other Chinese documents beside those I'm going to show that make attempts to explain an obscure policy dictum. And this policy dictum regarding Myanmar is translated tentatively as micromanage and control Myanmar, exert a stabilizing grip on northern Myanmar. In Chinese is called Jinglue Miandian, Wenkong Mianbei. This policy dictum basically means that China is interfering into the internal affairs of Myanmar, and that's why it's not appearing more prominently, so it's covert. Related to it, to this micromanage dictum, there is the so-called 3E, 1I, meaning this strategy means education, exploration, extraction, investment into Myanmar. The first E stands for education. Please, the next, yeah, good. E stands for education. And the idea of the Chinese is to weaponize education and propagate Chinese notions of political correctness among Myanmar people, and ultimately to brainwash and co-opt them with financial or other incentives until they readily acknowledge that China is their natural overlord. So this screenshot you can see, this is from a Yunnan provincial, this is a document from Yunnan provincial government on education. And this education is weaponizing education in Myanmar. So it shows here in white the policy dictum: micromanage and control Myanmar, exert and stabilizing grip on northern Myanmar. In blue, Xi Jinping's thought behind this dictum, and in red, down below, the attempts to divide and conquer Myanmar via weaponized education. Yeah. So the in red is they make a difference between Myanmar proper and they have another education policy for Myanmar North. So this is in red. Good. Please, the next panel. The next panel is Yes, I translated this dictum, micromanage and control. In Chinese, it's 经略. But here, this is a translation explanation. You can see in number 8 in red, you can see this micromanage and control can also mean, in other contexts, can mean economic aggression. But the Chinese use this word only for other countries. They never say they themselves do economic aggression. But in Chinese, it can mean economic aggression. So the tools the Chinese use to weaponize education are academic exchange activities financed by Chinese state-owned and private entities, as well as Chinese academic institutions, mostly located in Yunnan, so in Kunming, their biggest universities. So they are all actively involved in this. And of course, the PLA, the Chinese military, is also involved in this educational domain via arms manufacturer and exporter, Norinco. This is one of the biggest state-owned arms manufacturers in China. It's called Northern Industrial Company, Norinco. And they have this so-called vocational training basis platform abroad. And this platform is also thought to be a vector for covert Chinese military infiltration of Myanmar for recruiting local Chinese-speaking assets and interpreters. Working for Chinese commercial entities operating in the CMEC corridor, and that are all related to the PLA. Why do you need interpreters? Because in China, next to nobody speaks Myanmar language. Therefore, bilingual Myanmar Chinese interpreters are an important asset for this Chinese strategy. Now, the second and third E in the free E1I, exploration extraction. With the help of mining specialists and these interpreters, China aims to gain absolute control over the extraction of natural resources in Myanmar. Geological surveying and exploration of new natural resources in Myanmar should then be using mostly Chinese-made high-tech equipment, know-how, and personnel. So the translators are very important. Please to the next screenshot. Yeah, next screenshot, please. Thank you. So in October 2018, Xi Jinping presided over a special meeting, of course not open meeting, to study the problems of northern Myanmar, reflecting the great importance of Myanmar work that promotes the extension of the BRI into South Asia and Southeast Asia. And this document is also from a lower level Yunnan provincial prefecture. So they, in this document, they speak about Xi Jinping's covert strategy, and also the provincial boss, the communist provincial boss of Yunnan, Chen Hao. He is praising Xi Jinping's covert strategy, saying that Yunnan should stand at national level, understand and carrying out Myanmar work from a global perspective, share the worries of the Communist Central Committee, take responsibility for the state administration and resolutely complete the Central Committee's task entrusted to the Yunnan province government and Communist Party. Myanmar proper and northern Myanmar occupies a prominent strategic corridor position for the nation of China and for the Yunnan province, but the underlying situation is highly complex and serious. So here we can see that they want to divide and conquer, divide northern Myanmar and Myanmar proper. So it's in a official document. Corroborating those internal documents, which are not found anymore on these government websites. They have been scrapped. But there's a Chinese gentleman, Chairman Zhang of the Chinese government-controlled association dealing with Myanmar, who in a very candid interview admitted that Beijing was interfering in Myanmar's internal affairs simply by unilaterally moving its security defense line, the security defense line, from Yunnan west into northern Myanmar. This person said that Beijing was regarding the whole of Myanmar as its own security zone, because the stability of Myanmar was supposed to have a direct impact on the core interests and national security of China. He said further that Myanmar under a pro-Western, democratically elected government could not be allowed to exist. And because it would move politically and economically ever closer to the nations of the Quad, stressing that a pro-Western Myanmar government would be the cause of endless civil and ethnic wars, which is of course untrue. Investment. Now this is 3E1I. The last I is investment, and the Tatmadaw is not like an army, it's more like an oligarchic cartel. Therefore, the wealth of Myanmar is mainly concentrated in the hands of the corrupt and nepotist Tatmadaw. This has attracted Chinese political and commercial interests. Myanmar is home to 120 industrial conglomerates owned by members of the Tatmadaw. Among those conglomerates, some have formed prominent Sino-Myanmar joint ventures. And here we are again with who? Xi Jinping's policy aims for China state-owned enterprises. Xi Jinping's policy aims for Chinese state-owned enterprises heavily investing into those conglomerates owned by the Tatmadaw, binding their top brass personally and closer to China with stringent international sanctions on the Tatmadaw already implemented. China is therefore effortlessly gaining decisive leverage over the entire economy of Myanmar. What are the advantages for China? According to this micromanaging and exerting stabilizing grip policy dictum, the advantages are manifold. First, the military junta pursues an ambitious goal of turning the country into an authoritarian state that is ruled by a general who is masquerading as a civilian president. Such a political system exists already in Thailand since August 2014. So Beijing wants to be surrounded by authoritarian states, not by democracies. And so this is fully what China hopes. Beijing fully benefits from the Coup, which advances China's strategic goals in the entire region, be they short, medium, or long term. The four main advantages are listed and explained. Number one, geopolitical and geostrategic advantages. Number two, advantages gained by controlling strategic resources, Myanmar rare earth minerals. And number three, advantages gained by controlling other resources and, of course, the economy of Myanmar. And number four, ideological and political advantages, which are very, very important for the Chinese Communist Party. Clearly, all this is the opposite of the principle of non-interference, which Chinese diplomats and Chinese government always repeat. And for this precise reason, Beijing has attempted to hide this dictum and keep it covert. So that's everything. That's my introduction to my paper. So I'm basically over. I'm finished with it, and thank you very much. And if you have questions, please ask me anything. And yeah, give back to my co-host, Ms. Dia Shirin.
Thank you so much. That was extremely insightful. I think it's something that we all required to have a really deep look into what China is doing within Myanmar. I would now like to welcome Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar for his expert comments. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Dia, and delighted to be here on this platform. Thank you very much, Abhinav. Thank you very much, Usanas Foundation, for the invitation to share a few thoughts on this excellent paper that we have heard from Dr. Frank Leberger. So my congratulations and felicitations to Professor Frank Leberger for his very painstaking research and writings. I have taken the time and have greatly benefited from going through this paper cover to cover. And I think the explanations that have been provided by Professor Leberger have really brought alive all the arguments that he has made in his paper, in the document. So I don't know, as far as the paper is concerned, there is nothing much that I could really add to what Professor Leberger has said, except to make a few comments. One is that as has been mentioned by him and as has been stated very clearly in the paper, China has huge strategic, economic, political interests as far as Myanmar is concerned. It has always been a player there, a very active player. There might be no conclusive evidence as far as China's complicity as far as the coup on 1st February is concerned, but there is all the circumstantial evidence, particularly what Professor Leberger mentions about the visit of Foreign Minister Wang Yi and his conversations with the general about how the army will decide on the future of Myanmar. So there is all the circumstantial evidence to suggest that even if China did not was not it was if not complicit, it was in the know of what was going to happen. So even if it was not actively promoting what the army, the Tatmadaw wanted to do, but they were very much in the know of what was going to happen, and they were not opposed to it. But on the other hand, of course, the people of Myanmar seem to be convinced that China is hands in glove as far as Tatmadaw is concerned, and that is what is very important. The second point is that possibly the army never expected this sort of a reaction from the people. Yeah. They might have thought that they would be able to really control the situation. They were used to what had been happening, what has happened in the past in 1962, in 1988, and even in more recent times. So what has happened, this was possibly totally unexpected for the generals. Now, why did they do it? I think that has been a question that has been asked. Of course, as has been explained very clearly, you know, it is not only that the NLD won more than 80%, about 83% of the total number of seats, but in fact, they bettered on their performance that they had shown, that they had given in 2015. And the USDP, the party, the political party of the Tatmadaw, in fact, brought down its performance. It had a miserable performance while the NLD got about 396 seats lower in the upper house. The USDP got just about 33 seats. So their performance was even worse than what they had done as far as in 2015. So I think a number of reasons in terms of, the huge loss of face that was suffered by General Min Aung Hlaing and the army. And there was also the fear of losing power and influence going forward, because NLD had suggested that if they are able to get adequate number of seats going forward, they will try to bring the number of the seats which are committed for the army in the parliament from 25% to 15%, and going forward from 15% to 5%. So I think both in terms of loss of face as also the fear of losing power and influence. The second aspect possibly I could is that I think it becomes very difficult for the army to accept that there would be democratic forces which would be able to govern the country, because the mindset of the army and the Tatmadaw is that they are the ones who are the protectors and who are the saviors of the country, because they are the ones who fought against the Japanese and got the independence from them in the 1940s, and they have been at the helm of affairs ever since. So they can't, it is very difficult for them obviously to comprehend that there can be a different system in which they might not be omnipotent and all-powerful. And I guess the third reason would be that, they would try desperately to weaken the NLD and the appeal of Aung San Suu Kyi going forward. Although they have said, they have not termed it as a coup, they have said it's an emergency, and everyone can see that, it does meet the requirements of the imposition of an emergency, because neither, as Professor Leberger has mentioned, none of the conditions of imposing an emergency were satisfied before February 1st. What the charges they made, that there were so many irregularities as far as the elections, but they were not of a nature that would dispute the final outcome in any way. There might have been a few changes here and there, but the total general complexion and contours of the final outcome, that there would have been no difference, even if those irregularities or others were taken into account. And in fact, also the president is required to sign the emergency provisions, and the president, of course, he had been put behind bars. So it was the acting president and who was put in position, who signed this declaration. So I think finally it would be that although the whole thing was done with tacit Chinese encouragement or support, as is known, China did not even use the word coup for it. They just called it a cabinet reshuffle, a major cabinet reshuffle, when the whole thing occurred on the 1st of February, which is, very far from the truth. In the short time that is available to me, let me very quickly mention something, because we've been discussing about China's interest there. And I know that there has been a lot of commentary as far as India's interest in Myanmar and what it has done so far, because many commentaries seem to suggest that India is just standing by the wayside, waiting by the wayside, and not taking any proactive measures as it should be doing. And my own perspective is that India has stood with from the first day when the coup was ordered. It has been standing with democracy, it has been standing with the people, and it has been standing, in fact, with the future of Myanmar, that is with the youth of the country who have been protesting, who have been the leaders as far as the CDM movement is concerned. And very quickly, I'll go through some of these aspects because right on 1st February, India expressed its deep concern at what had happened in Myanmar. It pronounced that it was steadfast in ensuring that the transition process in Myanmar took place, that rule of law and democratic processes in Myanmar must be upheld. Yesterday in the UN Security Council meeting, the Indian representative very categorically condemned the violence that has been unleashed on the people in Myanmar. Also that there would be the representative condoled the loss of lives, urged maximum restraint, asked for immediate release of the detained detained leaders, and supported the democratic transition in the country. So I think this is as direct and as upfront as it can get. I think all of us are aware that, from the West, there have been sanctions have been imposed, but we know that sanctions are ineffective. India's position has always been that it would impose only those sanctions which are agreed to by the UN Security Council. The UN imposed sanctions are the ones that have the moral authority of the of the international community. And I think the countries that have been imposing sanctions, the problem, as we found earlier also, is that they have tended to push Myanmar into the embrace of China. And that, I think, is not good. It is not good for Myanmar. Yeah. It is not good for India. It is not good for the world. So I think we have to take cognizance of that China does not become it has been eyeing, for all the reasons that Professor Frank Leberger has put down very, very cogently and very explicitly, that if Myanmar finds it has no other option, it is going to go back to China, and that is not something that the world would desire. Of course, as far as India is concerned, we have a 1,643 kilometer long border with Myanmar. We have the Indian insurgent groups, the Nagas and all the others who have been taking refuge there. We have been receiving the support of the Myanmar army to deal with them. I'm sure all of us are aware about what was known as the surgical strike, which took place in June of 2015, when Indian security forces had gone into the Myanmarese territory and killed about 70 terrorists of the NSCN Kaplang group there. So I think India's security is also security, peace and stability of the neighboring states to Myanmar and elsewhere. It is very important. The third aspect, of course, is the prosperity in the Northeast, which because it is secluded, it is in one corner and it is separated from the Indian mainland. So its integration with the ASEAN, with Myanmar, with other countries, Thailand, etc., is absolutely essential. It is imperative for the economic development and growth of Northeast. And finally, it is, of course, the connectivity issues, the connectivity projects, many of them which are going on, which will really connect the Northeast to ASEAN and help it both in terms of stability, peace, security, and prosperity. The trilateral highway has been going on for quite some time. We know that the Kaladan multimodal transit and transport project, that has also been going on. So India has basically been following a calibrated and nuanced approach. There have been some comments as to why did India participate in the Army Day celebrations in Myanmar on 27th of March. I think that was something keeping our interests in mind and also the interests of the region in mind. I think this was a protocol attendance and presence that India had to go through. In fact, many of the other neighbors, for instance, Bangladesh is housing more than 1 million Rohingya refugees from Myanmar, but Bangladesh was also present there. Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, etc., all of them were there. India has been very active in terms of providing grant in aid assistance to Myanmar, building bridges, building schools, and so many other, making so many other improvements as far as the infrastructure is concerned. India is very active in development of the Rakhine state, which is next to Sitwe port, and it is also going forward towards the, as far as the Kaladan multimodal transit project is concerned. So I think it's, India is definitely interested that these development projects should continue and should move forward. India on its own, and this is my last final words on this issue, India on its own might not have the political, economic, strategic, or the military heft to impress upon the Myanmarese military to have dialogue, to have conversation with the protesters, so that there is a suitable transition to democracy and the results of the elections of November 2020 are respected. But India is acting along with ASEAN, along with Japan, and I think it is the responsibility of these regional countries to act in concert, to act together, so that the dialogue between the Tatmadaw and the protesters and the leadership that has been implemented, that can take place and lead to some positive results. I think it is also time for ASEAN to step up to the plate. You know, we keep on speaking about the centrality of the ASEAN, whether it is in the Indo-Pacific, whether it is in the Quad, even in the recently held summit of the Quad, we spoke about the centrality of ASEAN. And I think if ASEAN wants to retain, maintain, and promote that centrality, it has to increase its credibility. It cannot just be standing by the wayside, particularly when there are these very serious issues and challenges that are thrown up within its own region. So it has to take some bold steps and actions, and that is what will increase the confidence of this body in itself, and also of the regional powers, that it can really walk the talk. It is an instrument to promote peace and security in the region. Of course, no one is saying that democracy as it prevailed in Myanmar before February 1st was perfect. Obviously, it was not. 25% of the seats were reserved for the military. The three major positions of Home Affairs or Border of Defense, they were with the military. But I think it is imperative that the country goes back to the status quo ante before 1st February and get the results of the elections in position. It's going to be a tough task. I think it will need a very determined and a united approach of all countries, particularly of the countries in the region. And in that context, I would, once again like to thank Professor Frank Leberger for his presentation and for his very erudite paper, because it has brought home to everyone the manner in which China has been behaving, China has been acting. All of us are aware about the debt trap, about the lack of sustainability, lack of financial transparency of the BRI projects. But in Myanmar, he has laid threadbare all that China is attempting to do. So once again, my compliments to Professor Leberger, my compliments to Yusanas Foundation, Mr. Abhinav Pandya, and thank you very much once again for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I would, those were really well analyzed comments. We really require those. And
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.
I would now like to welcome Professor Naidu for his expert comment.
Okay, can you see my slides now?
Yes, it's visible. Please do go ahead.
Yeah.
Thanks, Divya. Thanks, Abhinav, and thanks for inviting me to to share my views on the subject. At the outset, my compliments to Frank Leberger for a detailed paper. I went through it very carefully, and there's so much one can talk about when it comes to China. China and Myanmar. In fact, I don't want to go into some of the details which are well known, which have been covered extremely well in the newspapers about the coup and the recent developments. And as has been well known that the one of the a couple of reasons why military did what it did by taking over the power. Simply because military was beginning to feel getting marginalized in the overall affairs of the country, and the civilian rule was getting consolidated. These are the two major factors. And so military that had enjoyed unfettered powers for such a long time could not imagine life confined to barracks. Now we have seen any number of examples, even within Southeast Asia, neighboring Thailand. We have seen repeatedly military taking over power. It also Tatmadaw also has numerous business interests and has strong political stakes. Its political role and enormous influence are legitimized by regional influence ASEAN, which always takes shelter behind the so-called politically convenient unwritten arrangement that is no interference in internal affairs. And China and India, in the name of strategic interests, have basically been on the sidelines. Not really come out strongly against the military coup. So the military could use both India and China against each other, and and take shelter under ASEAN's the so-called non-interference norm. So ASEAN has given political legitimacy to the military. And at one point of time, ASEAN did pressure. For instance, if we look at go back to the early days of when Myanmar was trying to join ASEAN. At that time, ASEAN could did pressure military rulers to hold elections, but that was when many countries did not have business stakes. But that's not the case now. Several ASEAN influential and rich members have huge investment and trade links. no wonder they're keeping quiet. Just give you a couple of examples. For instance, the largest investor in Myanmar is not China, it is Singapore. Singapore has invested more than $25 billion in Myanmar. And Thailand has got nearly more than 5.5 billion. Even a small country, one would not take that seriously. A country like Malaysia has got more than 2.5 billion investments in India. That's more than double that of India. And India has got just 1.2 billion. So these are the new realities, one of the reasons why, these countries are relatively, keeping quiet, In any case, even if ASEAN, not just like Indonesia has been, Myanmar, it can always point out about another very important ASEAN member, Thailand. Just in 2014, military took over, and ASEAN could not do anything, did not say anything. So ASEAN doesn't have the moral right to say anything openly, with respect to the military coup. These are the unfortunate geopolitical realities. So with that brief introduction, let me basically focus on China, Myanmar. I thought was the main focus of this webinar. So one should realize that China's engagement with Myanmar is different from other Southeast Asian countries. Myanmar is not only endowed with natural resources, we all know that it's also geostrategically located at the crossroads of China, India, and Southeast Asia, and it provides the access to Bay of Bengal. So this is the reason, if you really look at one of the richest regions in the world, together with more than 3.3 billion population, with 45 trillion dollars GDP. So this is right in the center of this region. That's where Myanmar is located in. And due to the shift of focus from continental to maritime sphere, both geoeconomically and geopolitically, so Myanmar offers a key outlet to the crucial Indian Ocean region. Indian Ocean, given the disputes and the issues with respect to the South China Sea. Of course, China also shares a long border, land border, nearly 2,200 kilometers with Yunnan province, and thriving trade. The trade along the border itself is more than 350 million a year, which is 6 times more than that of India. So for Myanmar, China has been the most trusted political ally, stood by it in tough times and provided arms to fight insurgencies for a long time. It also offered huge aid when it badly wanted, and is investing in infrastructure when all others were not that keen. Yet fully understand the pitfalls of excessive dependence on China, but has few choices. So at the same time, the quandaries Myanmar is faced with dealing with China are obvious. If you really look at Milestone Dam project, in which it had to cancel. So there's no way India can really provide the kind of financial or economic alternative to China. China's engagement, if you really look at with Myanmar, I've given some details about 2-3 ways in which China is engaging Myanmar. So one of the most important is Langkang-Mekong cooperation. Mekong is the lifeline for mainland Southeast Asia. Its developments goes across. And 1 minute. Launched in 2015, already held 2 summit meetings, several. This is going to be one of the major avenues through which China is going to engage Myanmar. There is a 3.5 mechanism of cooperation and 3 cooperation pillars: political, security issues, economic, all sorts of cultural, people-to-people exchanges. There are 5 key priority areas: connectivity, production capacity, cross-border economic cooperation, sharing of water resources, and agriculture, and poverty reduction. A large number of activities are undertaken under LMC. Second is Yunnan. Yunnan's go southwest strategy of engaging the mainland Southeast Asia, a relatively backward region compared to east and south until recently. It is being developed as a major hub that could connect to, the larger Southeast Asian region, due to its location at the heart of three fastest growing regions. So, Yunnan occupies a very, very, a critical place as far as China is concerned. I've given some details. It's already one of the fastest regions, and is playing a key role in forging relations with most countries of Southeast Asia due to its multicultural composition, as Leiberger has mentioned, the Thais and Burmese, across the border. Yunnan is also a key hub for BRI, with an average growth of 11%. Yunnan GDP has grown to 265 billion by 2018, about 11% of India's, thanks partly due to strong cross-border economic and trade links. So that's the reason why China has launched what is called Go South strategy. So this is the Pan-Asia rail network. If really the kind of network that China is building. So that this is very, very important aspect. I don't want to go into details about railway network, but it's massive. It's going to be real, game changer insofar as China and mainland Southeast Asia are concerned. Once the Pan-Asian railway network is completed, under this ambitious plan, China plans to build 5,000 kilometers of railway network linking Kunming with Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and of course Singapore. Western line starts from Kunming and ends in Singapore, touching Rangoon and Bangkok. We'll have 3 railway lines: Western, Central, and Eastern, as the previous map had shown, and it will have huge. It will greatly facilitate the movement of people as well as goods at high speeds. Since 2018, Kunming has been connected to the national high-speed railway network, and thus the Southeast Asian railway network will gain increased significance. Once you go to the Kunming, you can go to any part of China by through high-speed railway network. Pan-Asian railway network is bogged down due to some reasons, but China is paying a lot of attention. There's also air and road connectivity. This is the border between. Sorry, my throat is not okay. Kunming is also emerging as the key air hub connecting with Southeast Asia. I've been several times to Kunming. I've seen, year after year, the huge, the number of, people who travel to Kunming and from Kunming to, it's increasing in leaps and bounds. In early 2018, for instance, this airport operated 235 flights a week, 236 airports in Southeast Asia, compared to, sorry, okay. And then the next is China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. A part of the BRI initiative, China-Myanmar agreed to a 15-point MOU to develop this in CMEC in September 2018. The 1,700 kilometers long corridor will connect Kunming to some of the major cities in Myanmar. It's also seen as a bridge to the larger BCM economic corridor, if and when it materializes. Same is also logical conclusion of rapidly expanding economic relations between Myanmar and China. Bilateral trade has grown phenomenally. Last few years, border trade alone is it's more than 6 billion. Okay. Once all these connectivity projects are done, especially border trade, will pick up greater momentum. Thanks to liberalized visa regime, hundreds of thousands of people across the border for business and work. You can see them across the border. Between 1988 and 2017, China has invested more than 20 billion. The second largest investor, now of course Singapore has emerged as the largest investor, slightly dated data. Okay. So this is managed to get some data on various projects that China is involved. You can see that large number of projects in which China is involved in across Myanmar. Of course, I don't want to. Specifically, on India, I just want to add a couple of points. India accepting and expressing consent has not really done much, and it even explicitly and expressly told Mizoram government not to allow refugees, which I thought very inhuman thing to do. Sending a representative, nothing can justify parties sending a military representative to the military parade. 6 ASEAN countries did not, excepting Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Other countries did not send. So that we didn't have to really keep company with countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and China. At least some message could have gone across. True, of course, nowhere else India-China interest clash as sharply as in Myanmar. There are huge strategic interests, but the so-called strategic upside that China would enjoy, a strong line. There's a tendency to exaggerate, India's strategic interests compared to China's. India needs to decide whether it wants the friendship of the military or Burmese people. This is the time India really has to, take a decision. By keeping quiet, it doesn't really, it sends a really wrong message. Whether it's committed to democracy or to some vague, undefined, strategic gains, it's not going to really cut much ice. Of course, in any case, India cannot match, China's economic muscle. Quickly, some major conclusions. For instance, Leiberger has mentioned that, and therefore it makes sense to assume that China was actively involved right from the beginning in planning execution of the coup in order to gradually take over, incorporate into sphere. That may be a bit of an exaggeration, frankly. I don't think China was actively involved. I don't see that. How does it help China? In fact, perception that main backer of the military China is palpable. If you look at Chinese businesses were attacked, Chinese embassy was not attacked, but huge demonstrations happened. Okay, there is certainly that feeling that China is supporting the military, but China is behind the military coup. I am not very sure about them. If you really look at, but China has a lot to lose if it really alienates a large section of the people. There's a large enough ethnic Chinese are there. They will become the target. Okay, if China continues, seen to be involved in the military coup. There was no need for China to instigate a coup, for instance. Okay, whatever it wanted to do, it could do. There was no issue. If you look at Aung San Suu Kyi, the first thing soon after 5 years back, when the civilian government took over, her first visit was to China. She understood the significance of China. So there was never any major issue between NLD government and China. So there was no need for China to get involved or instigate a military coup. That's my personal opinion. Okay. I told you China has certainly a major strategic and economic interest, more than 20 billion investments compared to India's just 1.2. Bilateral trade is just 1.7 billion, which is nothing compared to China. China had excellent relations with NLD and Aung San Suu Kyi. Personally, China has huge political, diplomatic, economic investments. China's relations with Myanmar should not be seen in the narrow perspective of just Myanmar. For China, Myanmar is the gateway to the rest of Southeast Asia. Okay, Southeast Asia today, ASEAN as a grouping is the largest trading partner of China. So Myanmar is should be seen as a gateway to the rest of Southeast Asia. In fact, all the railway and trade and aid networks, they actually connecting, to the entire Southeast Asia. The coup is not in China's interest. That's my personal opinion. It may upset many of its plans. Already bearing the brunt of the coup, the anti-Chinese feeling. It's one of the major thing China should be really worried. For military, so long as China, India, Japan, and ASEAN do not condemn or take steps such as sanctions, it has nothing to do worry. So they have the political legitimacy and the complete support of the big guys in ASEAN, India, China, and Japan. Beijing said it will support ASEAN's approach. India too should do the same, but it has to take a principled stand in very high expectations from India because it is a democratic country. By keeping quiet, taking shelter on the strategic interests or whatever, supporting vaguely, it's not going to really help India. Time ASEAN took the initiative, as rightly pointed out earlier, to stop the bloodbath and restore democracy. Whatever it is, whatever ASEAN's, some of the members, investments and other economic interests, time ASEAN took the stand and publicly start putting pressure on Myanmar. Probably I can't think of any other. It becomes that much easy for India and even for China and Japan also to support ASEAN, stand behind ASEAN to put pressure on Myanmar and to engage the civilian leaders and restore democratic rule. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, my throat is in a bad shape.
Thank you so much, Professor Naidu. That was very holistic and very deeply engaging on your part. Thank you very much. I'll now welcome Dr. Kipkin for his comments on the paper and the situation in general. Thank you.
All right. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I just want to say thank you to Abhinav, especially but I'm a little bit, I think, if I remember the email you sent me correctly, one of the emails, of course, you sent me a bunch of them. You said by 7:20 we should end the program, and now it's 7:31 already. So I will try to make it very quick, maybe 5, maximum 10 minutes, would not be more than 10 minutes. So again, thank you. I would like to say thank you to Frank. He is putting together a bunch of informative background on China-Myanmar relations, and also Professor Naidu. Good to see you again. And in fact, you have put out some of the figures, the numbers, which is important in understanding the detail, the nuances of China-Myanmar relations. But I'm not going into all those details. I'm going to briefly talk about some of the facts of let's say the history, the modern history between China and Myanmar, and come to the base. I'll make some comments on the other speakers. If you look at a little bit of history, let's say if we have to start from the country's independence. In fact, when China, the People's Republic of China, was founded, Burma was the non-communist first country to recognize it, and then in fact China and Burma, at the time it was called Burma, had established diplomatic relations on June 8, 1950, just a year after the People's Republic of China was founded. And then China and Burma signed a treaty of friendship and mutual non-aggression, and promulgated a joint declaration on June 29, 1954, basing on the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence and what they call Pok-Po relationship, its kinship in Burmese. However, following the 1950, the signing of that declaration, there was Burma maintained some kind of neutral policy, foreign policy toward China, but things turned a little bit ugly in the 1960s when there was anti-Chinese riots across the country, and that led to the expulsion of many Chinese from the country. And relations began to improve significantly in the 1970s, and then the Communist Party of Burma was the support of Burma's Communist Party was gradually reduced after things were improving. Then, following the 1988, making it short, following the 1988 military coup, so both sides, especially Myanmar, is trying to establish a solid and a robust relations with China. This is some of the historical facts that we can see since the country's independence. Now coming to Frank's point. Frank, I really appreciate the nitty-gritties of the nuances that you put together, but there are some things that I just would like to maybe, I don't know if I may say disagree, or I don't know, something that I would just like to add on to what you had pointed out. In fact, on January 25, if I remember correctly, I don't remember exactly the date, but there the military came out and openly suggested that they were, let's say, open to military coup. That suggested that, I mean, basing on what was happening behind the screen, the voter fraud allegation and so on and so forth, the military was saying that it was not ruling out a coup. So that showed that I think it's not just China. In fact, many people within the country were very nervous whether this is really going to happen, what is going to turn in the next few days. Because anyone who lived during the time of the first military coup and of course the second military coup 1988, the first 1962, really understand the unpredictability of Myanmar military leadership. They do everything the way they want to do without any hesitation. Therefore, there were apprehension. In fact, there were fear, concern, lingering concern among many. But again, I just want to highlight the fact that China's policy on Myanmar, or China's relation on Myanmar, which Frank and Professor Naidu touch upon in a bit, is that it is not necessarily based on who is ruling Myanmar or which party is in power. If you look at in recent times, especially in recent times, China's priority is internal stability in Myanmar. Having said that, why do they want internal stability? It is because they want to protect, promote, and preserve their investments, their economic interests. And of course, Singapore is the largest investor in Myanmar, but China remains the single largest country trading partner with Myanmar. So for China, it doesn't matter whether it's NLD, whether it's the military or anyone who is in power. What matters to them is internal stability, because China shares land border with Myanmar, and in the event that there is instability in the country, many people are, likely to flee inside, Yunnan province, likely to flee there. Not only that, as long as there's political instability, it is going to affect Chinese interest, investment. So look at March 15, after a month or so of the military coup, when the protesters targeted Chinese-run factories in Yangon. That was the day when Chinese government came out very strongly. The Chinese embassy in Yangon came out very strongly, issuing statement that the leadership needs to take urgent and immediate action to punish the perpetrators, the culprits. So that showed that, of course, there was a huge backlash from the people, because they accused China of only speaking out when their economic interests are directly threatened. So this is why for China, it is what matters most is political stability, where they can do business as usual. But Professor Knight pointed out very good point is that before even NLD came to power, Aung San Suu Kyi, it was before even before the election, Aung San Suu Kyi went to China. She was welcomed by both the president and the prime minister. And announcing that they would like to enhance cooperation, party-to-party ties, which is the Communist Party of China and National League for Democracy. So this shows that for China, what matters is not who is in power, which party is in power. What matters is a stable government and political stability, and whereby they can rely on those leadership in Naypyidaw to promote and preserve their national interests. And then having said that, I just want to come to the mindset of these military generals. Since, I think Frank already talked about this, if you look at why the military in Myanmar has been so, let's say, critical and central, inherent to all these the polity of the country is that yes, they were part of they were the ones who fought against the Japanese, also the British. Not only that, they are the ones who, since the country's independent, in fact, just 1949, when the first insurgent group, KNU, Korean National Union, was formed, since then, it's the military which says that they are the one protecting and they are the guardian of the country. So if you look at the constitution throughout, including the 2008 constitution, there are 3 regions or 3 issues when emergency can be declared or when a military can intervene. The one is a threat to national disintegration of the union. The second is a threat to national solidarity. The third one is a threat to the country's sovereignty. And as one of the other speakers rightly pointed out, they cited Article 417 and 418 and the emergency powers of the military. But the problem was that before the coup was officially declared, the leaders, especially the president, who were supposed to coordinate between NDSC, National Defense Security Council, which is the highest civil security body in the country under the 2008 Constitution, was already detained. Therefore, myself included, many scholars arguing that the military is violating the constitution they drafted. But if you look at what happens in 2003, back in 2003, the former Prime Minister General Kim Il-sung announced a 7-step roadmap toward democracy, what they call disciplined, flourishing democracy. And if you go back in history, after the first military coup in 1962, Ne Win introduced the so-called Burmese way to socialism. What that meant was a blend of socialism and the role of military in politics. So that's something that the military continues to do until this day. And in fact, in the 2003, when they announced the 7-step roadmap to democracy, that means that it's a disciplined democracy is where the role of military is enshrined and entrenched within the politics or the polity of the country. So despite what China did, what the international community did, I think we should understand the fact that the Myanmar military is doing how they wanted to do things since from the beginning. Of course, their expectation was that NLD would not come out so strong. Their calculation was that they already have 25%. And then they have USDP, Union Solidarity and Development Party, military-backed party, and other minority parties. If these political parties combine, they were expecting that if they, even if they did not come out majority as a coalition partner, they were believing that they would reduce the popularity or, let's say, the power of National League for Democracy or Aung San Suu Kyi. But that came out to be wrong, untrue. Therefore, things did not work out the way they wanted to. So, they found a reason, a pretext to launch a military coup, which is a violation of their own constitution. Therefore, my argument is that it's not necessarily China or any country for that matter why the military intervene and declare the state of emergency. So military continues to do, they want to play and they want to steal. They never wanted to give up power. That's the basic argument. Before 2011 democratic transition, Myanmar seriously or closely studied the transition in Indonesia, which I also do a lot of research on. What they did wrong was, in Indonesia, gradually the military reduced its role in politics and then eventually allowed the civilian administration to flourish. But in Myanmar, they try to do it that way, but when NLD and others try to, let's say, gradually reduce the role of military, but they oppose it strongly. So that shows that the military try to copy, imitate Indonesia's model, but they are copying the wrong formula or the wrong trajectory. So finally, what happens next? So we know that yesterday, and last night for us here in India, the UN Security Council again discussed, and in recent times, I think China has somehow become a little bit coming out of its hiding or comfort zone, I would say, especially following March 15 attacks on Chinese factories. So, and as long as the protests continue, which is likely to happen, because people in Myanmar, especially who did not experience 1988 military coup, or the 1962 military coup, they already had 10 years, even though it was imperfect democracy, they already experienced democracy. Therefore, they never wanted to go back to the dark days of military dictatorship. Therefore, it is no longer about Aung San Suu Kyi, National League for Democracy. It is about, let's say, opposition against military dictatorship, democracy versus dictatorial regime. So I think it's in the interest of China, and including India, and the ambassador was talking about how India has been taking a proactive in support of the democracy movement. I would disagree with this. I think if you ask any, I mean, most of the Myanmar people at this time, especially people who are protesting, they are very disappointed with what India has been doing so far, being the largest democracy. They set an example. If not sanctions necessarily, at least a coalition that they could lead. If you look at following the 1980 military coup and 1990 election, it was India which was one of the most vocal critics of the military junta in Myanmar, standing up for democracy, standing up for human rights. And then, in fact, they hosted many Burmese in exile, and in some of them, in fact, the former defense minister George Fernandez hosted some of these exiled people in his official residence in New Delhi. So there is a stark difference following this 1988 military coup versus 2021 military coup. So I think. I would stop there. I mean, I thought I would take only 5 minutes, but I think I take more than that. So the point is that it's not about China or any country why the military is intervening and doing the way they do things at the moment. It is the military psyche, the military agenda, which was set on, I mean, which they started in 2003, and a part to what they call 7-step roadmap toward a flourishing, disciplined democracy. And so that's what they are doing. And they may hold another election after 1 year of emergency rule, but we do not know. And they have started disbanding the old election commission. They are not now forming a new election commission. It is likely that they are not going to allow Aung San Suu Kyi to ever come back again in politics. And they may try to find a way to suppress and subdue NLD. Either NLD would choose its leadership or boycott the next election. Then, if the NLD boycott the next election, it will be a win-win situation for the military, like they did in 2010 when the ex-military general Thein Sein became the president. Similarly, when there have been some report, I mean, of course, Min Aung Hlaing had reportedly said he wanted to be in politics. And it is possible that either himself or somebody nominated by him might become the president of the country if there is no, let's say, reverse of this, what we call military coup and a restoration of democracy at the earliest. Thank you very much.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.